Hello everyone, today I'll be narrating 3 new creepyposts that I found off of the Let's Not Meet subreddit. Liking this video and subscribing to my channel helps me a lot. After you've heard these stories, let me know what you think of them in the comments below. But without further ado, let's dive straight into their experiences.
These are their stories.
I started a new job about 6 years ago. It was great. Really liked all my coworkers and the job itself is really awesome and I still love it. This was before the pandemic and everyone was in the office every day. I work in a large multi-floor, multi-wing building filled with numerous businesses and agencies. I started getting into a routine. We have a gym and locker room in our building. I would go work out before I was on the clock and shower, get ready, etc. I'd go get breakfast at the next building over most mornings at around the same time. I'd go on walk breaks with coworkers at pretty much the same time every day. It was very regimented. In the morning when I worked out, everyone had a pretty set schedule. We didn't know each other, but there was kind of an unspoken pattern. A coworker would finish and shower before me, then I'd go, then the head maintenance guy for the building, and so on. This is where it all begins. One morning, like every other, I get out of the shower and I'm in the small locker area, and there's this little older man over at the sinks. He's not doing anything but looking at himself in the mirror, but you could tell he was just loitering. Weird, but whatever. A few days later, he's there again. Then he's there every morning at the same time, and he's definitely looking at me while I change. This creeps me out, so I stop working out in the morning. Then, after a few weeks, we're walking back from getting breakfast, and he's walking the other way towards the other building. I tell my coworker that's the guy that would always be in the locker room watching me get dressed. After a few more days, he's walking the other way from us getting breakfast every day, and he looks right at me every time. So I make an excuse and stop going for breakfast. Our 9 a.m. walk around the building, he starts just appearing and walking the opposite direction from us every day. Literally everyone walked around the building in the same direction except for this guy, and he'd stare at me as we passed. I tell the coworker who was a woman about the guy and what had happened, and she just laughed it off. The only reason he'd go the opposite direction is to make sure he saw me. Our 1 p.m. walk around the building, wouldn't you know it, he's there walking the other way and staring. So I just stopped going on walks at work. This is where the real magic begins. I have no clue where this guy worked in our building. I would come into our hallway every morning at the same time. From the time I went through the doors to the time I got into my office, it was maybe 15 seconds. We were on the first floor, and at the end of our wing is a staircase. Every morning as I'd come into our wing, he would pop out the stairwell and come walking the opposite direction and stare at me as we passed each other. One morning I'm walking into the bathroom to go number 2. I stop and blow my nose real quick. As I'm walking to the back stall, he comes into the bathroom. We have 2 urinals, 2 stalls in this particular bathroom. No one is there but us. He comes into the stall next to me, widens out his feet so his shoe is under the divider and on my side of the stall. This dude is tiny, maybe 5 foot, so he'd have to almost be doing the splits. Then he lets out this deep loud moan after about 30 seconds, then leaves. I start telling all of my coworkers. Most of them laugh. I felt so creeped out and helpless. Like, what do I do? Any guy I work with that I tell this about laughs at me. The women just shrug it off or have an excuse for why he is always there. So I ask one coworker to pick any event at any time during the day to prove he will show up. So we decide to go out for a walk at noon. After 5 or 6 days, there he is. Now she believes me. Everyone in the office knows now. I've told my wife all about this and she is supportive. She has had her share of workplace creepers as well. I get to read the texts and emails. My closest coworker and I decide to start working out at 1:30 p.m. every day. I want to get my gym time in, but I don't want to do it alone. After about a week and a half, guess who starts showing up every day? He'd just come in and loiter around. Mind you, the guy has never tried to talk to me before and vice versa. 2 guys lifting weights and this little old creepy guy just sitting there watching me. Here's where it hits the peak. My lifting buddy had to cut out early one day. My stalker is there with us. I was just going to leave, but screw that, I don't want to let this little weirdo control my life anymore. There is an elevated padded stretching platform on the weight side of our gym. He takes his shoes off, lays on his back and starts doing hip thrusts in the air and holding it while he stares right at me. I'm walking around trying to pretend I don't notice him while he follows me with his eyes, pelvis elevated in the air. After 20 minutes of this, he puts his shoes back on and goes into the locker room. I'm texting my lifting partner and wife the whole time telling them this is going on. My wife tells me to confront him, I don't. I get in the locker room to grab my bag and he's at the sink. The top couple buttons of his shirt unbuttoned and he's rubbing water all over himself while looking at me in the reflection in the mirror. That was it for me. I started working from home almost exclusively after that, then the pandemic hit and I've been remote ever since. This happened Sunday night. I got into a very huge fight with my mom and it was very emotional and intense to say the least. We made up and said goodnight to each other, but I was still pissed off. So my impulsive self decided I was going to take off for the night. I just wanted to cool off. I went into my backyard and hopped over one of our walls and started to walk around. Mind you, it was midnight. I didn't even have a phone in case something happened or a weapon for self-protection. For a bit of a layout of my story, down the street from my house, which is a neighborhood road, there is a church and a preschool across from it. In front of the preschool there are large, tall hedges that sort of hide the pickup/drop-off that's in front of the school. There's a stop sign on the church's corner before the busy main road and a street lamp on the same corner. I made my way down to the corner on the church's side. I was very bored and cold, but it's not like I could call a friend to pick me up and hang out for the night. I decided to face the main road and put a hitchhiker's thumb up in hopes of someone pulling into the street and letting me use their phone to call a friend. After what felt like forever, I was getting no luck and then I saw a guy from across the main road and I called for him. I didn't have any weird feelings about him. He was harmless and he let me use his phone, but I still wasn't able to find any of my friends to come and get me. Before he left, he asked if I had a knife on me or something. I said honestly, I forgot mine at home, and he handed me a small but very sharp switchblade and told me to keep it to stay safe and have a good night. After watching him walk into the dark heading east, I wandered up and down the sidewalk as cars passed by often. I started to pass the hedges and I glanced over to the left of me where the school was. I saw a large silhouette of a man slowly creeping around in front of the doors to the small preschool. He was tall and looked like he was strong, broad shoulders too. It took me half a second to realize he stopped and saw me too. I went into flight mode and immediately noped out of there and ran across the busy street because it was empty at the moment and kept sprinting until I was 5 streets down and realized he wasn't following me. About 30 minutes had gone by and I decided it was time I made my way home. I eventually crossed the street and was facing the main road walking down to the church and take a left and get home. It was silent and no cars had gone by for a few minutes at that point. Then I heard a car speeding down the road and I turned my head back to see if it was a large white Suburban. I dismissed it thinking nothing of it as it turned right a few streets down across the road. I started to turn the corner under the street lamp when I looked back up again and saw it was starting to come out of the same road it just turned into. I don't know what told me to run, but I did. I ran into the parking lot of the church and started to see headlights turn into the street. I threw myself onto the ground behind a ramp wall that was barely tall enough to hide me. I was trying to stay silent at the same time because the Suburban's headlight reflected off the walls of the building as it pulled into the parking lot. It made a few laps from what I could sneak a peek of and stopped in the middle for a couple of minutes before it turned out and drove into the main road. I waited it out a bit longer and pulled the knife out, listening for anything and everything. Once I realized I was probably in the clear, I ran back home. I'm a French student doing a master's in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. I live alone in an apartment in a building where there are only students. I'm 22, enjoying life peacefully. To give you a bit of context, I live in a calm, good neighborhood. The only noises I'd hear are the tram or parties in the building since a lot of students are there. One night around 10 p.m, I hear a knock on my door. I live on the 3rd floor, and to get to my front door, you have to open the main door which needs a key. And then you need to open the door to my corridor with the same key. So people who want to come into my door must have the key, call me, or ring at the door so I could open the doors for them from my apartment. Nothing of this happened. I just heard a knock on my door. I usually open the door without a second thought, whether it's my landlord or a neighbor asking for something. As I told you, I feel pretty safe in the building, but this time, for some reason, I had a bad feeling about this. I didn't move at first. I thought the person would just leave. I had finished my assignments. However, the knocking continued for 30 seconds. I said yeah in English. The person knocking doesn't say anything. I ask in English again, who is it? The voice answers in English, it's Uber Eats, which is weird because Dutch always speaks Dutch and I recognize the voices and accents of everyone on my floor who have the key to access the floor. So it wasn't a neighbor, it wasn't my landlord, it was somebody claiming to come from Uber Eats. But the issue is I didn't order anything from Uber Eats that day. The voice was unfamiliar, in case it's a prank or a neighbor pulling a joke. It was also a deep voice, at least 40 and probably a smoker. I replied that I didn't order anything, you must have it wrong. After a few seconds, the knocking continues and the same voice says, I'm pretty sure you did, I have an order under your name. I start panicking. I look around and pick up a knife in case he breaks the door because the knocking was getting a bit louder. I checked if my door is locked, it wasn't. I was literally 10 centimeters away from him. My front door was the only thing keeping him from me, and I'm glad it doesn't open from the outside. You need a key to open it even if it's not locked. I step back and I ask again, what's the name? He seems to be thinking for a few seconds, then a final knock occurs. It was loud and it translated some anger or frustration. Finally Finally, I hear him going down the emergency stairs right next to my apartment. The steps were heavy and the person was clearly in a hurry. I don't know what he wanted or what would have happened to me if I'd opened the door as I usually do. I still haven't understood how he got through the 2 doors, and why he did come specifically to the last apartment on the 3rd floor. Did he try others before? I posted a post about it on the WhatsApp group we have in the building. No one saw anything suspicious. No one opened the door for anyone. Alright, so that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Let me know what you thought of these stories in the comments below. But as always,
Have a nice day.